this thing about free rent, right? Sounds great to me. I'd love to have free rent. I'm sure everybody listening would love to have free rent. So please tell us, how do we get free rent?
It's funny. People think, oh, free rent, that's not possible. That can't happen. Like,
Hmm.
you up here telling stories. But no, free rent is absolutely real and it does exist. And there's really two ways that you can get it.
Doing numbers like I'm MJ and Dash Jackson and Jordan. Boy, I'm killing y'all boring. Time to give the world what they really need. That's the
Good
HOMIE.
afternoon, tribe. My name is Darius Lester, your financial philosopher, and this is Mammoth Money Mindset. And this evening, I have a very special guest with me, Mr. Justin Pogue, the founder and author of Rental Secrets. The reason I brung Mr. Justin on is because I thought it was interesting. He's actually coming from a very different perspective than most real estate experts would. His focus is around the renters themselves and how they can negotiate better, use their influence, power, and potential to get the best deals that they can while being renters and not actually the homeowner. Mr. Pogue, do you have anything you'd like to say to the audience? Just to introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, Darius. Um, it's interesting that most of the discussion around real estate and real estate investing is focused on the landlord. And that's where I spent, 20 years of my career is in that role as being a landlord and property manager. Um, but one time between property management gigs, somebody suggested that I write a book. And I didn't know what that would look like. I'd never done that before. So I kind of went to the bookstore, looked at the shelves, and I saw books for everybody under the sun in real estate except for renters. And that's kind of what kicked me off on this journey of writing this book and really speaking to the power that renters have in their ability to negotiate with landlords.
Okay. No, that all makes sense to me. So I guess before we get into um, you know, questions about your process in helping renters and what your book's all about, could you give us your experience and your background? Like what's your history with real estate?
Absolutely. Actually, real estate was an accident.
Mhm.
Um, so I had gone to graduate school to get my MBA, and I graduated into the dot-com bubble imploding. And my plan had been to go into management consulting, but that industry was imploding right along with all the dot-com companies at the time. But my mother, who had been a real estate agent in the 80s and had always kind of dabbled with investing in real estate,
Mhm.
she suggested that she's like, well, you're not doing anything right now, let's go check out this real estate thing. And I was living in California at the time, so we took a road trip from California down to Florida and started purchasing properties off of what's called their lands available list. So that's properties that the taxes weren't paid and those taxes were put to auction, and people bought those tax interests in the properties. And after 3 years, if no one's bought those tax interests, then the property ends up on the lands available list. And that essentially looks like you pay those back taxes to the county, you jump through some legal hoops, and you actually get control of the property.
Mhm.
Usually they're vacant lots and properties with dilapidated houses on them and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, so we actually purchased 3 properties there and then flipped those properties to developers after getting the title cleaned up. So that was where my whole experience started.
Okay.
Um, and then from there, um, one of my cousins was going to a small college in Georgia,
Hmm.
and we happened to be there around the time that they were taking the tour of the campus, and we saw what the dorms looked like, and they were not in good shape at all. I mean,
Right.
even like mold in the closets and all of this. So
Hmm.
we were like, well, we can probably do better than this. So we scouted around the that college's community, and we found some builders that were building some duplexes, 3 bedroom, 2 bath on either side.
Sure.
So we kind of bought those, reconfigured and bought furniture and installed furniture in there and set it up for students to live there. So we were renting rooms to students that were going to that university. So that was kind of our next foray into that. And that went really well. So we were like, okay, well, let's find another larger university, because that one was small. That was like 3,000 students. So we're like, let's find
Sure.
another larger university. And we found the University of Southern Mississippi, which is located in Hattiesburg. And we bought a 32 unit apartment building there. And it required a pretty significant amount of renovation.
Hmm.
And it was really me and my mom getting in, painting and laying tile and hanging cabinets, and like I had this whole like soup to nuts real estate investment experience where we just
Right.
dove in feet first. um and eventually that whole thing got us up to 72 units
Nice.
that we owned and we were managing. And then the requisite property management roles that went along with that, managing tenants, marketing property, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So that kind of in a nutshell is the 20 years of experience I've had in real
Right.
estate investing
Okay.
and management.
No, that's good. I think it's good to have, kind of the full picture to see like, okay, you didn't just start off with, 100 doors just given to you or something like that. It's like, nope, we decided we wanted to
Yep.
start trying this business out, just kind of trial and error, slowly building stuff up, learning what works, what doesn't work, and just acquiring them, at the best places and best rates that, you can get along the way.
Hmm.
So I think that's cool. I think that's very, that can be pretty relatable to a lot of people, either at the beginning of their journey or if they're, going through it, trying to be more intertwined with real estate.
Hmm.
So cool, right? Getting houses, fixing houses, renting them out, all that stuff. Seems like a pretty decent business. Um, but right now your focus is on, the renters. You made a book for it, you got this whole philosophy around it. What I would like to know, I guess, like what made this seem better than, just being a landlord and letting that, be your income and just kind of chilling out on life with that. And then, from that, tell us, I guess, more about like what the whole book is about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, so the book came, well, actually, let me back up and we'll start at the 30,000 foot level. So when you look at across the US today, there's this conversation going on between renters and landlords, and
Hmm.
politicians have inserted themselves into that conversation.
Sure.
And for the most part, that conversation is full of venom, animosity, angst, um, feelings of frustration, and on a certain level, from the renter standpoint, inferiority, in terms of the power dynamic between renters and landlords. And then politicians insert themselves into that discussion, and they're coming in and saying, well, we will help protect the downtrodden renter. And basically they're pandering for votes, because most
Sure.
of the solutions that they are presenting are not market based, and they're not ultimately in the best interest of all renters.
Hmm.
um, and if you want, we can dive into some of that later. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot level. But the book itself came about, um, as I mentioned earlier, somebody suggested that I write a book, and I went to the bookstore and I'm looking at the real estate section. I see books for real estate investors, real estate agents, insurance agents, mortgage brokers,
Hmm.
like everybody in real estate across the board, except for the one group that brings the money to the table, that pays all of their salaries.
Hmm.
And that's the renter. I mean, most people don't really sit back and think about it, but over $500 billion, that's trillion with a T, is
Right.
paid in rent every year across the US. I mean, it's absolutely huge.
Hmm.
And those people have, and no one is teaching anyone about, this is why landlords do what they do. This is why they're thinking the way that they're thinking. This is how you can affect or kind of steer situations that affect you as an individual by understanding how they think and
Hmm.
presenting your case from that perspective.
Right.
Um, and that's really where this book came out of, is this realization that this is the group that is foundational to the whole industry and nobody is talking about it. And when you think about it, like, you can, there's a whole magazine, Consumer Reports,
Hmm.
talks to you about refrigerators and computers and cars and all these different things, but and how to choose them and how to go through that process. But renting is like, if someone's a renter, that's their biggest expense every month, year in,
Right.
year out, and nobody's talking to them about how to optimize that. And I thought, somebody should be.
Sure. Okay. No, if it makes sense, it makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
I guess I never really sat and thought like trillions is a ridiculous number. But yeah, I guess if it's every single person's largest expense, it would, end up getting into those numbers.
Yeah.
Mm,
I mean,
so,
so there's only about 36% of people who are of households that are renting across the country. But I mean, it's an absolutely massive, massive industry. And most people think about the really big, like, apartment communities, like your Avalons and your Gray Stars. And
mhm,
yes, they're really big, but the overwhelming majority of people who are landlords, they own one or two properties. They're small mom and pop operations. That's
mhm,
most of what's out there. It's not a very consolidated industry, not like the car industry where there's like five companies that own all the brands. Like,
right,
it's spread out a lot, and that also creates the it's also the reason why real estate is one of those places where people can grow and develop wealth over time too.
sure.
But that's yet another subject.
No, no, no. It's all important. So I guess let's get into the I guess the power and ability aspect. I believe I'm not too far out to say that most people would believe that, in a renters landlord relationship, that the landlord holds all the power and the renter is just there. They're just there, they're paying them, month in, month out. They need to make sure they follow whatever rules the landlord set, pay whatever deposits, keep whatever upkeep they're supposed to keep, and then the landlord just keeps allowing them to stay there.
Hmm.
um, what yeah, I think I feel like it's pretty general that that's the thought process of most people. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, landlords have a choice of what they invest in. They
Hmm.
could have invested in gold or silver or bonds or stocks or any of those choices. They actually chose real estate. And just like those other investments, they're trying to create some kind of return on their investment.
Hmm.
So, that being said, and in the case of a smaller landlord, it's usually for retirement. So the renter is literally living in the retirement plan of the landlord, which makes the relationship between the renter and landlord extremely important.
Hmm.
You're renting that place to someone, and that is important to you, um, because it's part of your financial plan.
Hmm.
Um, and when you look at it from that perspective, then the renter becomes extremely important to the landlord. I mean, and as a and having had this experience as being a property manager, like, I don't want to have to find a new renter every month, every 6 months, every year. I
Sure.
want that person to move into that rental, have a great experience, and stay for 5, 7, 10 years, as long as it fits what they need in their life.
Hmm.
Um, but I want them to stay as long as possible. Um, so like Kim Kiyosaki, the wife of Robert Kiyosaki, always tells this story about when she first bought this duplex and she rented it out. I mean, this was decades ago, so like the rents were really low. The rents were like 350 on each side
Right.
or whatever. Um, but she rented them. First year passed, and she was going to raise the rent by $25 a month. And she did, and one of her tenants decided to move out. Because of that $25 a month bump, it took her about 6 months to find the new renter.
Mm.
And she lost 6 months of the full rent
Right.
in an attempt to get 25 extra dollars.
Hmm.
And that's just kind of a small taste of the power that renters have in that relationship, because renters don't have to stay. They can choose to leave,
Hmm.
and then you have to go through the process. The landlord have to go through the process of finding that new tenant, cleaning the place up, getting it ready for the next person, and all of that has cost and risk
Right.
attached to it, which the average renter doesn't even consider. Because I think it's also getting to the point of, the name of the show is Man with Money mindset. This mindset that the landlord is your enemy, so you don't think like them.
Mm.
We don't consider what our enemy is thinking.
Right.
Um, and I think that's the wrong way to go about it, because at the end of the day, renters and landlords are two sides of the same coin, and they
Hmm.
need each other. Just like a renter is never going to go out and build a house
Hmm.
for themselves. They need to find a place that they can rent. The renter needs the landlord. The landlord is renting you space in their retirement plan. The
Right.
landlord needs the renter.
Okay. I like that. I like the thought of, like codependency, in a way. So, let's say, so I have a fiance, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got engaged last month. She is currently,
Congratulations.
thank you, sir. So she is currently renting a place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we would like to, um, we would like to move into like a new, house, a new purchased house together, to kind of start our family, right? We
Mm-hmm.
don't want to move into my place. We don't want to move into her place. We want to just start anew.
Mm-hmm.
So, she's been knocking around the idea of like, I think her lease actually ends this month. So she's like, do I need to sign another 12-month lease? Should I ask about a 6-month lease? Um, she's worried about how much they're going to raise her rent, if she asks for a shorter term period. But then she also wonders, well, heck, what if, just because of the way the housing market is and all the paperwork and whatnot, what if she does the 6 month, but then she needs a few more months and she has to do month to month? She's wondering what the price of that's going to be. So for a person maybe going through a situation like that, like they're renting a place, their lease is about to end, um, they know they don't want to stay in that place another year, but they fear of how much the increase will be on the rent. What rental secrets do you have for that person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. There are a couple of things. Um, so yes, it's true. Typically, if you ask for a lease that deviates from the 12-month norm, they do ask for higher rent, because you're asking for a concession. It
Hmm.
means that sooner than otherwise would happen, they're going to have to start looking for new tenants. Um, but that being said, I think you mentioned that her lease expires this month. January is not a big month for people looking for rentals. They would rather have, so let me back up. Every year there's rental season, and rental
Okay.
season usually starts in the spring and goes all the way through August. And but summer it particularly gets intense, because that's when all the college students graduate from school, and they're looking for new places to live, setting themselves up for these new jobs that they're going to have.
Hmm.
If well, the way things are going now, if they're not going home, they're looking for new places to live.
Right.
But then there's also this whole other contingent of people who they have families, they have kids, and they're trying to get into the school districts of their choice for whatever reason, and they're all moving around. So there's these 9 million families that are moving around during rental season, and it happens every year like clockwork.
Hmm.
And how that's relevant to your fiance and her situation is having the lease expire in January is not ideal. So she may be able to negotiate a 4-5 month lease, and then her lease would come up during peak rental period,
Right.
during the peak rental season, and that may be advantageous to the landlord.
Mm.
And she may present it from that perspective,
Right.
to the landlord or property manager that she's dealing with. And then the other thought that I had was, as far as the month to month rent, it does give you a lot of flexibility. Um, Typically, they'll charge an additional 20%, um, for that month or two, um, where you're exercising that option. But that 20% is a whole lot less than being responsible for a whole nother, at least for a whole nother year. Um, and yes, if you move out within that year, you're still responsible for lease, but the landlord is still obligated to be looking for someone to replace you as the responsible party.
Hmm.
But then you're taking on the risk of, well, when will that happen? And you're continuing to pay rent while you're waiting for that to happen. Um, so usually what I advise people in that situation is go looking for people who need places to live.
Hmm.
I mean, even to the point of run your own ads, talk to everybody, find somebody who is willing to take on that responsibility, because the sooner it happens, the sooner you're off the hook.
Sure.
Um, so like if your rent's $1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000, like it certainly makes sense to invest some time in finding that person who's going to get you off the hook.
Hmm. Okay. So I can see that. So I guess you're suggesting that in negotiations, so when talking with the landlord, try to think from their perspective, on peak seasons and whatnot. Pretty much just I like to be real forward with people, I guess, when I talk to
Mm-hmm.
them. So it's like, hey, I'm planning on leaving sometime this year. I prefer not to leave right now as it's January. And I don't have everything set up. But I hopefully will have things set up by maybe, July, August, time frame. And I feel like it would be easier for you to get a new tenant in here during those times as opposed to if we were just to leave right now and you just, it's
Mm-hmm.
this month and now you just need to find someone. You're probably going to miss these next maybe 2 months, of full rent while you're doing whatever cleanup or renovations you have to do. That equates to maybe, I don't know, maybe 30, well, 3,000 or maybe 3,500 or something like that
Mm-hmm.
dollars that you just missed. Or, if you don't mind, we would like to keep paying the same amount, but just from, this month to this month, being real transparent with you, you know exactly what time period you could start, looking now, just start advertising for this month and already have somebody lined up to move in to kind of lessen that financial burden that you'll run into when we do leave this place and just kind of maybe try to chop it up with them, from that aspect. Like, hey, yes, this is for me, but also if we do it this way, it looks out for your interest as well to kind of lean
Yeah.
on that, codependency dynamic that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. No, I mean, excuse me. Um, Absolutely, because you're much more receptive to somebody who's not only looking at the situation from their perspective, but from yours as well. And here's another aspect, especially when you're dealing with corporations that own properties. The person that you're talking to in that office typically has no power over policy or pricing or anything like that. They have to go and make a case to their regional property manager or vice president or whomever. If you've actually thought about it from their position and you've presented that to them, now they have information and ammunition that they can go and make your case to whoever they report to, which is a much more effective strategy than what most renters do, which is just come in and kind of only present the situation from their perspective and kind of spend their time in the office like whining about what's going on, and complaining. So it's looking at it from their perspective sets you apart. And now they're able to go and and they're more inclined to go and have that conversation with their boss. Because if you think about how that conversation is going to go, they're going to walk into their boss's office and be like, well, yeah, this person came into the office today and they whined about such and such, and what do you want to do? As compared to, this person came into the office today, they presented this plan. They laid, and in their plan, they laid out these 3 ways that we benefit from what they want to do, and then they would also get this benefit. How would you like to handle this situation? And I know as a senior real estate person, I'd much rather be presented with the second situation.
Right. Okay. Nope. That makes sense. So from the notes in your book, I saw something along the lines of wondering what is the real meaning of our rents are competitive with the market? Can you expound on that?
Yeah, it's a very common phrasing that is used within the real estate industry.
Sure.
And everybody thinks it means, oh, this is the best price for this apartment for me. And it doesn't mean that at all. When they're determining what's competitive, what they are doing is they'll pull out a map, they'll put a pin in their property, they'll go out about a mile, and they'll draw a circle.
Sure.
Everything inside that circle that they consider to be their competition is what they're gauging themselves against. So if it's an apartment community, they are looking at similar apartment communities with similar finishes, with similar amenities. And then they're building their pricing off of that. Well, you might have chosen that community because it's 30 minutes west of your job. But there are other communities 30 minutes east of your job that you might also be considering. They did not consider those options when they were determining what was competitive for you, nor did they include condos that were for rent, townhomes that were for rent, homes that were for rent. They did not include any of that in their analysis. Their analysis is done from their perspective, not yours. They haven't met you yet. They have no idea what you're looking at.
Right.
So when they say their rents are competitive with the market, it sounds really nice, but it has nothing to do with you because they don't know who you are.
Sure. Okay. No, that makes sense. And I mean, even as a property owner myself, when I'm doing, market comparisons, I put a pin in a map. And, yep, in this neighborhood, this is how much this stuff is. I definitely have never even thought to take into account, something on a completely opposite side of the city. So let's say, so I think a decent amount of my viewers are military members, right? I'm a military member myself. We move a lot, we rent a lot, right? Just because I think, every couple of years they make us pick up and go to some other city, some other state, sometimes some other country. So I think this rental information could be very beneficial to them. Do you have any advice that might help, some military members that are, PCSing as a permanent change of station? So
Mhm.
that's what it's called anytime they tell us to move, pick up our family and move to some other location.
Mhm.
So anytime we PCS, is there any, I don't know, maybe off the top of your head, you can think of uh, things that we should be wary of or something that could help us when trying to rent in a completely new state or city?
Yeah. So do your best not to rent sight unseen.
Hmm.
If you have the opportunity to be on site, take the tour and see the unit that you would be and see the unit that you would be renting. Um, Absolutely go and do that. If you can't be there physically in person, then do like a Zoom tour with the property manager, walking you through the property.
Is
And
this
not
for
just
houses and apartments?
houses, apartments, rooms, whatever type of situation you're looking for.
Hmm.
Um, because you're going to make a commitment to be in this place for a year, 2 years, whatever it is. You want to know exactly what you're getting into. But it's not just the unit or the community itself. You also need to know about the neighborhood because you're not just renting an apartment. That apartment
Hmm.
is in an apartment community, which is also in a neighborhood. Um, so those are aspects that are definitely important to keep in mind. The other thing I would say is from a perspective of military people, if you are receiving a stipend for housing, don't just assume that you have to rent and look at this as being an individual. If you or a group of you can get together and put like use those funds to put a down payment on a house, and then live in that house while you're at that particular station. And then if you need to move on from that, then that could become a rental property. Like
Hmm.
think broader in terms of what you can do with those resources because most people don't get housing stipends typically,
Right.
and that is a resource that is available to military members. And if they're a little more broad in their thinking about how to use that, um, then they can start achieving some wealth for themselves. Um, using the benefits that they get as military members.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So when I was in my early 20s, right after I first joined the military, normally they'll make us live on base, in the dorms or the barracks, what have you. And then after a few years, they let us move off. I was fortunate enough to have friends who had moved off a few months before me, and they just invited me to come live with them. We were
Mm,
renting an apartment, but there were three of us in one apartment. That equated to us paying like 300, something dollars every month. And I was able to pocket the rest. Honestly, that was probably a very, very, very strong factor in a lot of my monetary success, I would say.
mm-hmm,
Because I didn't realize it at the time because I wasn't really doing it intentionally. I was just kind of doing it passively. But I would, since I'm only paying, 300 a month because I'm sharing a space with people, sometimes we're buying each other food and, so on and so forth. I
mm-hmm.
was saving a ton of money while I was there.
Right.
After, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I have like thousands of dollars like in my savings account. And I just looked at it one day. I was like, oh, I can go buy a new car if I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I kept trying to. Luckily, I had someone more senior than me tell me not to do that. I was definitely gonna go buy like a Jaguar just because.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no, it's fine. I saved the money. Then he's like, don't just spend it. That's stupid. And
Uh-huh.
that was the whole thing. I didn't do that, so I appreciate you, Jerry. Thank you for stopping me from just blowing all the money that I saved.
Jerry coming
Um,
through strong.
for real. So, but buying a place that, especially while I was younger, coming out of the, basic training, coming out of the dorm, so on and so forth, that was something I never thought about. But looking back, that could have been amazing because that same money that we were putting, into, that apartment, if we went all in, put a down payment on somewhere, um, and stayed there, that'd have been cool. Us moving on, renting it out, and just splitting the rent up three ways or something. I think that would have been real, real nice. It might be something I pitched to some of the the younger people, but it's so hard because it's like monetarily great idea, but given people's personalities and stuff like that, it could be difficult getting that legally and financially intertwined with people because some people I don't know might stop paying stuff that they need to pay or think they need more money and then start causing headaches. So do it cautiously, properly vet whoever you're gonna deal with before you put money
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. And there are remedies for that. So let's say three people put down equal down payments on the property and they
Sure.
start renting it out. There are expenses that come up, and one person is like, well, I can't, like, we need, let's say it's a new roof, like $5,000. They're like, I can't swing my third of that. And so the remedy is the other two handle the cost of the roof, but the value of that is either taken out of the share of rents that they would get over time,
Hmm.
or it's taken out of the equity that they would get from the sale of the property, down the road when they do sell it. So there are some really creative ways to balance those
Hmm.
things out. But as you were talking, I also thought about one of the, and it kind of goes back to my motivation for the book, is that we were told you go to school, you get good grades, you graduate, you get a good job, and then life will be all sunshine and rainbows and
Right.
unicorns. But there's no real financial education going on in high school or college at all.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter whether you're going to public school or private school. Like I went to private high school, went to one of the best colleges in the country, went to graduate school, got an
Hmm.
MBA, still didn't cover any of this personal finance stuff.
Right.
Um, and literally, when you finish that formal education or whatever, you're being pushed out into the job market, and finding a place to live and money are two things that you're going to have to deal with right off the bat immediately. And none of it was talked about.
Right.
And from my perspective, it's criminal. You are setting people up to fail.
I think it's
It's not
intentional.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's intentional, and it's not right. Um, and I'm just coming from this perspective of, we are all better off if I'm helping to make you your best and you're helping me to be my best.
Right.
And that makes the pie bigger than it would otherwise be. So why squabble over the small pie from yesterday when we're making all new pies and they're all 20% bigger, like Costco apple pies,
Right.
like, why not do that? But that come when you're talking about, that 20-year older, person who's early in their military career, even like understanding or comprehending the ability to go in on a rental with two or three other buddies and like set that up. um that's part of the reason why that mindset isn't there, is because nobody's talking about
Right.
money and investing and how to use money. So yeah, Jerry, like, kudos to you, man. Like,
Hmm.
that's, everybody needs a Jerry in their life.
Right. No, definitely. Jerry's great. His only downside is he is a Dolphins fan, but it's okay. Um, but honestly, and he's just, he's a bit older. He retired out of the military, after doing his 20 plus years, and he came back to still work on military installations as a civilian employee. So that's where I met him. He had already gone through all the stuff I had yet to even see, So him looking back, he's like, I see you trying to do stupid stuff. Don't do that because of this reason. He was actually the first person that told me to buy a house.
Mhm.
At the
Mhm.
time where he told me to, I didn't because, I'm young and nobody
Yeah.
just listens to good advice because, why would you do that?
You just have to have the mindset to do
Hmm.
it. And you have to get to that point. But and kind of also to the point of why I wrote the book is in the financial advice industry, everybody's focused on, oh, you make $100,000 a year. Well, this is how you save money and prepare for the future. You stop eating out, you cut out all your subscriptions, you get rid of Netflix or whatever. And then after a few months, you have money to start investing in growing your wealth and all of that. And that's not the majority of people in the country. The majority of the people in the country is like, I don't make 6 figures, I make 5, and rent is due on Friday. So help me with that.
Right.
So Rental Secrets is really an attempt to meet people where they are, not where we would hope them to be, or where, where the easy customers are.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I like that. And honestly, so besides this, YouTube channel and whatnot, my main thing that I do, outside of the military is financial counseling. So it is just talking to people, most regular people, helping them with their budget, looking at their finances, seeing, what they've done in their past, talk about what they can do in their present to then influence their future, right? So I enjoyed doing that. And honestly, just while you were talking just now, I was like, okay, that's normally whenever I talk to people, obviously I'll be like, all right, what are all your expenses? And they'll lay everything out. And I just have some in my head that I think are go-to. These are ones I know, can be cut back or divvied up in a different way. So I'll talk about those. The rent and the mortgage are normally, unless someone's just living way, outside of their means. I don't normally touch the rental or the mortgage portion because I just consider those as, set in,
Fixed.
things. It's like I know you can't do anything about it right now, unless your thing's about to end, your rent's about to end next month or so. But after hearing you speak about it just now, I think I probably will at least bring up the question to implement something about the rent, because it's possible that they could maybe use some of the strategies in your book to maybe negotiate, a couple $100, off of their rent or something, which opens up all kinds of doors, in the budgeting space. Um, Especially even if the landlord was about to raise the rent, if they can just do something to stop it from raising or minimize how much it's raising by all of that stuff, because that's set in for a whole year, that literally is putting thousands of dollars back into your pocket, which you can then use on whatever debt you might have or goals that you're working towards. So I think I will try to start implementing that.
Yeah, one of the most, I guess, heartwarming or just really kind of feel good emotional experiences I've had around the book is when there's a guy who was working in Palo Alto, California, and he was an assistant manager at the local YMCA.
Mm-hmm.
He came to me and he said, you know what? I took your book. I applied it to my negotiation with my landlord, and I was able to save $250 off of my rent. That's huge.
Right.
And it kind of gets people thinking about that rent number, because as you pointed out, most people think about it as it's this fixed number that I can't do anything about.
Mm-hmm.
But if you broaden your mindset a little bit, who said that I had to live in a 1-bedroom apartment or a studio by myself after I graduated and became an adult? Who said that I can't live in a roommate situation with 3 other people and split that cost?
Mm-hmm.
Who said that I have to buy a house that only I live in? Or actually, even before we get to that, who said I only have to buy a house? Why can't I buy a duplex
Mm-hmm.
and rent the other side out?
Yep.
Or if I'm buying a house, why does that house only have to be for me? Why can't I buy the house, rent rooms in the house? That pays my mortgage, and now I have more Now I have more resources to work with on the investing side. So I think that we're all kind of seeped in this consumer culture
Hmm.
where we have to accept these options that the market presents just off the shelf.
Right.
Just like you walk into Walmart, you pick up a tube of toothpaste, the shelf says it's $3.50. You go to the cashier, it's $3.50, and you walk out the door. That's the way most people are thinking about it. Nobody's sitting there trying to haggle with the cashier about,
Hmm.
whether whether $3.50 is a fair price or not. Um, but they're just the mindset needs to be opened up broader as to what options are really out there. There used to be a really decent show on HGTV, and it was basically about convincing people, instead of buying a house themselves, buy a duplex, rent out one side, and
Sure.
then that helps cover the mortgage, and this is how you're better off financially. Um, but those concepts really need to come back, because as we're experiencing this whole period of inflation, I mean, just the
Hmm.
cost of eggs alone was ridiculous.
Right.
um Looking for those ways that we can redesign our lives, to so that it works better,
Hmm.
for us. And actually, I also do a podcast called Renter Confidential, and one of the episodes I talk about this concept of product substitution. So, like, for example, if you want to buy filet mignon, but filet mignon is too expensive, so you can
Hmm.
buy sirloin. It gives you
Sure.
a similar experience,
Hmm.
um, but you're substituting one product for the other. And this is really from a business MBA perspective. This is really what we're talking about, is product substitution. So you're substituting instead of doing the 1 bedroom apartment, you're doing a 3 bedroom apartment, and you're renting, and you have roommates. So you're
Sure.
finding substitutes for the products that no longer fit what you are looking for.
Hmm. No, I like that. And uh most stuff I see that's referred to as like house hacking,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I mean, I do it. I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
it right now. I bought a house. I bought this house a couple years ago, and it's a it's like a 3 bedroom, 2 bath house with like a bonus room. I'm the only person here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't got no kids and a wife, so I'm just here, and it's cool. It's nice, right? There's a nice comfort to having your own space, but honestly, there's like a whole half of the house that I never used. I turned one of them into a guest room. I've had maybe two people stay in it like over the like 2 years, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just sitting in there getting dusty. Um, and I don't even remember. I think I was talking to some other real estate friend I have, and they were doing Airbnb, and they told me about Furnish Finder, and that you could, rent out furnished, rooms. And I was like, oh, I can rent out just the room by itself. I was like, heck, let me try that out.
Mm-hmm.
I literally took some pictures, made an account, posted it. Posting something on Furnish Finder cost about $100 for the year, and then what? I think it took a week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably about 1 week, maybe a week and a half. And this guy hit me up, did a little background check, all that good stuff, and yep, he moved in, and he's been living here. I think he just hit a year here.
Okay.
It's it's
Nice.
it's been fine. Yep, and I'm getting
Nice.
a gracious amount of my mortgage paid every month, for somebody staying in a room that I wasn't using.
Right.
So I'm a huge advocate for that.
Yeah. And I mean, and besides the financial benefits, there are other benefits too. And none of the financial benefit is the one that's most guaranteed, if
Sure.
anything's guaranteed. But the other benefits are really important as well. There are professional benefits, that having a roommate, as long as you have a good relationship, that allows you to potentially plug into their professional network, whatever
Hmm.
that happens to be.
Right.
There may be social benefits, like that person may be really good at cooking and you're not, and you can learn that from them.
Hmm.
Um, so it's not necessarily always about the money, but there are a lot of kind of foundational life benefits that roommates can get from, you know, sharing space with each other.
Yeah, no, I personally think it's an amazing concept, but I will say I notice a lot of people have apprehensions towards it. Just I want to say fear, I guess, is a big portion of it. Um, but even maybe even more so, like besides the fear, I feel like people, I don't know if it's social media, I don't know if it's just, you know, the zeitgeist, you know, just the times that we're in right now, but everyone feels like, you know, kind of like how you mentioned earlier, they feel like they have to be in their own space by themselves. If they're not doing that, they're not doing something right, or that they're lesser than because they're, you know, sharing a space as opposed to living in their own.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to people with that kind of mindset to try to, you know, help them along?
Well, I think I was watching television and I saw these, you see these commercials and a lot of them are pharmaceutical commercials or whatever. Um, but someone was pointing out that a good percentage of the country is busy taking antidepressants. So if this concept of I have to have my own space to be my own person and that's going to lead me to happiness, if that was working, why are so many people taking antidepressants? If this was the solution, why is this other solution why has this other solution been so prevalent in a lot of people's experiences? um, we're meant to be social creatures. We live in communities. I mean, when you introduce the show, you introduce yourself to the tribe.
Hmm.
So there are social structures that people participate in, whether it be friendships, families, tribes, different, you know, online communities, what have you. That's how we're wired to operate. We're not wired to be alone all the time.
Right.
Um, which is, you know, which is one of the reasons why the last 3 years were so detrimental to our psyche as a society. Um, but if you're sharing space with the right person, like nobody object, like you mentioned earlier, you have a fiance, you're going to be moving into a house together.
Hmm.
That is a version of a roommate situation.
That's true.
Now, there's other things that go along with that, but it's two people pulling their resources, working together towards a common goal.
Hmm.
And the roommate situation, the typical roommate situation, is similar. It's just the common goal is not to raise a family together. The common goal is that we're all better off for this experience.
Right.
So it all gets back to mindset and how you're thinking about these options that are in front of you. And absolutely, like, you're choosing someone to live with. So you want to choose wisely. You want to be choosing people who are going to bring things to the table, preferably beyond just, you know, making the rent payment for the room.
Right.
Um, but there are a lot of benefits to broadening that perspective. So the house that I grew up in San Jose, California, we're now renting rooms in there to young professionals in the area. I
Hmm.
mean, yeah, it's like a room, um, because it's an urban area and things are really crazy expensive there and all of that. But one of the roommates was working as an assistant manager at a pro shop on a golf course,
Right.
and he wasn't liking the job. The things that he was promised weren't happening, you know, no personal development or growth and all that kind of stuff. Well, there was another guy who moved in the house. He was only there for 2 months. He was
Hmm.
transferring to a new job from LA, and they talked, and it turns out there was a job opening at his company, and the other roommate applied and got the job, and now he's in an entirely brand new job, entirely brand new industry, and he never would have known about it if he hadn't been rooming with that person.
Hmm.
So it doesn't even have to be like we have these deep, like years long relationships or anything like that. It's
Right.
just you're exposed to different opportunities because everybody's coming with a different network.
Hmm. No, yeah, and I think I'll talk to people about that a lot because I very much believe in the power of being social. There's been so many, like if I go back and I actually count, there are so many opportunities that I have been granted that purely came from me just being, social or allowing myself to be vulnerable enough to strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be, I've also had like a car rental business. And when people would come to pick up the cars, I go out there, give them the key. I talk to them for a good 5 minutes or so, just, hey, how's it going? This is this and this, this pool's to the left, or this is how you start
Mm-hmm.
it. And we'll just talk about, yep. And they'll ask like, oh, how long have you been doing this? I'm like, oh, I've been doing it this long. I do this in my main time. What do you do? And there's been a few, I found my mechanic through that. Because one of them came and picked up, he was borrowing a truck and he's like, yep, no, but I'm a mechanic that does this and this and this. I'm like, oh, well, I just started this car rental thing. I'm definitely gonna need a mechanic. Boom, got his number. There was somebody else, they were just renting because their car was in the shop. But she saw that I had multiple cars and she was like, oh, well, I do Airbnbs. I have a few in the city. Maybe sometimes we can partner and you can, leave some of your cars at some of my Airbnbs. So it can kind of be like a bundle deal. If some people are
Nice.
coming to stay at places, and they want to have, a car already there waiting for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even with her, she's entrepreneurial, so I talked to her about like my goals, things I wanted to happen in the future. I was like, yep, I want to try flipping a house. I want to try doing this. So I'm on the lookout for some distressed property, so on and so forth. Just because we had that I didn't tell her, hey, go find me some distressed properties, right? I didn't
Mm-hmm.
hire her or anything like that, but just being open and vulnerable with her to be like, hey, this is who I am, these are some of my goals, some of the stuff I'm interested in, some of the things I'm working towards. She went in, I guess, through her network of, Airbnb people. One of her lawn care guys told her about a guy who owned like 30 properties and he was trying to get rid of them before he moves to New York. So
Mm-hmm.
then she came and told me, she's like, hey, this guy, here's his number. He's selling all these properties, so on and so forth. You said you wanted some, you should go talk to him. It's so crazy that all that stuff lined up, but none of that would have happened. One, it wouldn't have happened if I didn't trust people enough to start renting cars to them. And then two, just talking to people and being open about, what I'm interested in and what my goals are, just trickled down, the rabbit
Mm-hmm.
hole to this. Now, technically, she's the one who helped me find a house. In turn, I ended up, buying a house and turning it into an Airbnb and all this stuff. But yes, I think social aspects are like very, very powerful. And I think that
Yeah.
concept is slept on by a lot of people.
Yeah. And we have this tendency to focus on the negative. So
Yes.
I'm watching this video and this guy is writing out like, okay, 7 times 1 is 7, 7 times 2 is 14, 7 times 3 is 21. And he wrote 7 times 4 equals 29. And everybody in the room was like, hey, that's wrong.
Hmm.
And he was like, yeah, that's wrong. I'll correct it. But for the other three that I got right, nobody said a word.
Right.
Nobody was like, great job, you're on the right path. Nothing. It was only the point that he made something that he wrote something that was wrong. Did anybody speak up and say anything? And
Hmm.
I think that's typical of part of why people think about the risk of trusting people is
Hmm.
because the stories where that trust was abused or went wrong are the ones that get amplified.
Right.
But the stories about where it went right don't.
Hmm.
So like this assistant manager of the golf course, he's now in a new job. He's having a great experience. That's not a story that gets amplified. Your experience of renting a room to this person over the course of the year, that's going great. That doesn't get amplified. And because it doesn't get amplified, it doesn't get attention, and people are drawn to what does get attention. And the negative stories are the ones that get attention. But there's a lot of good, even even after the past 3 years. There's a lot of good things that are happening out there.
Mm-hmm. No, no, for sure. Because like in my thing, yep, guy rents home to stranger, stranger pays them every month on time, and cooks food every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
That'll get, it's like, okay, so same scenario, guy rents home to stranger, stranger breaks half of the stuff and steals all the TVs in the house and leaves. That would be
Mm-hmm.
plastered everywhere. It'd have a billion shares, a billion likes, views, and people be like, see,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'll never get a house. That's not why I'll never rent out to anybody, because people are
Mm-hmm.
crazy. See, I told you that was crazy.
Mm-hmm. And here's the other thing. They watched that 30-second video about that and they came to that conclusion. Because they only watched, because the video was only 30 seconds, what they didn't see is, okay, that happened. X, Y, and Z is covered by the insurance that the person had on the
Hmm.
property. Then the part that wasn't covered, that the person who was renting there, you have their ID, you know where they work, you have information, financial information about them. You go down to the courthouse, bring your evidence,
Hmm.
get you a judgment, file that judgment against their credit,
Right,
and now you can go and recover your funds. Is it a perfect solution? Absolutely not. But there are remedies that
right.
are available that don't get covered in the initial 30-second soundbite.
Never. Nope, that's like I said, the car rental thing. I was like, ooh, I'm gonna start doing this. I'm telling you, every single person was like, "You're gonna do what? You're just gonna rent your car to random people?
Strangers?
That's crazy. What if they poop in the back seat? What if
Mm-hmm.
they steal your car? What if they break this? What if this and this? And it's just negative, 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 negative. It's just all kinds of things. It's like nobody wants to like look at any of the possible positives. And honestly,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, all of the negative things, like I've had somebody get into an accident. Okay. There's literally insurance right there. That's
Mm-hmm.
the whole point of it, is like, sure, you did that. Okay. Pay my deductible, the rest gets fixed. Wait a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm back to renting it.
Yeah.
Like,
And and they miss the fact there are entire companies, Hertz, Avis,
mm-hmm,
Dollar, Thrifty. That's what they do all the time.
right,
And they are multi-billion-dollar companies.
mm-hmm,
Um, but the other thing I want to point out is those people that are telling you no, they're not purposely trying to hold you back.
right,
They're trying to protect you from a risk and danger that they see
mm-hmm,
because they don't have your perspective.
right. No, that's for sure. Actually, I saw, see if I can remember it. Saw a quote the other day. What did it say? Nope, can't remember the exact quote, but
Mm-hmm.
the gist of it was um that people will limit you uh, to their own ability, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's if I perceive that this task is really hard or very dangerous or something like that, I'm going to advise that you don't do it, because, maybe I've tried it, maybe I've just heard about it, but I'm like, nope, this is hard. I could only make it to level 6. Don't even waste your time with it. You'll never do it. And that's not a negative thing. I'm not trying to hold you back, hurt you, or nothing. It's like, hey, don't worry, I already tried this for you. Don't do it. It's not going to work. But that my experience doesn't have anything to do with your potential,
Mm-hmm.
because you could jump in and you could just go straight up to level 10. You could be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that wasn't that bad. And I'll be like, what? No, no, that's hard. At level 6, you're 3 of your tires get popped or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, and you're like, oh yeah, well that happened. I just got the hose plugged and
Yeah.
I kept going, and it's like,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So it's interesting. I appreciate people for trying to look out for people, but at the same time, you do got to take into account that those are limits that you're creating, and not to, over press them onto other people, because it could be possible that somebody could be better at something than you, or have a different way of going about something than you would. So after you say your piece, if they still want to do something, root them on, let
Mhm.
them do it. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. There was a personal development group that I joined, and they have like training in their online section or whatever. But one of the first lessons of the training is, who do you listen to? And I think it's really, really important, because, and not just in the financial arena, but across the board. Um, but so like, somebody like Warren Buffett will come out and they'll give advice.
Hmm.
And you're like, well, that's great, Warren, but your advice doesn't fit me, because you're a billionaire and you're looking at things from a different perspective than I'm looking at it. So I just need to take those nuggets
Hmm.
that apply to me and leave the rest, because it doesn't apply.
Hmm.
Um, and that ability to discern, like use your discernment and judgment and critical thinking to determine what nuggets apply to your situation and what doesn't.
Right.
um that is a skill that, I mean, I'm still working on. I mean,
Right.
it's hard. um but it's really important, because taking good advice at the wrong time
Hmm.
can be detrimental to what you're trying to do. And like, and I know as an entrepreneur, I've seen like these different like pieces of software that are out there that will do X, Y, and Z, and they're so
Right.
great, and
It's a lot.
there's no fraud involved. They do what they say they're going to do, and all of that. It's just, I've bought into them and I haven't gotten much benefit out of them, because I wasn't in the right place to
Right.
make the most of them. It had nothing to do with the software, the product they created. It was me that wasn't prepared. I just didn't know that I wasn't prepared.
Mm.
Um, but that's where that like self-awareness and ability to discern and have judgment really important. Um, in not only in investing, but in health and fitness and
Hmm.
foods that you eat and all kinds of different things.
You know,
Um, and that's
I
why that's one of the reasons why I like this whole like um so there used to be this show on TV called The Biggest Loser, and it was
right.
all, and you got people losing weight by like pulling tractors and flipping tires, and like,
Sure.
understand that that's, use judgment and discernment, understand that is a TV show. They are trying to get eyeballs. Flipping tractor tires is not required to
Mm-mm.
lose weight.
Right.
But I mean, if you're somebody who's trying to lose weight and you're looking at their show and you're like, I will never ever lose weight, I'm not even gonna try,
Hmm.
you're not listening to the right person. You're not
Hmm.
taking the right pieces you're not taking the right pieces of advice
Right.
um from that experience.
And like to the discernment piece, I never watched The Biggest Loser. I'm aware of the show.
Mm-hmm.
I will assume that also in the show they probably talked about diets, like
They,
eating this
yeah.
and eating that. So maybe the discernment piece would come in. Like you see them flipping tires and
Mm-hmm.
jumping over stuff, and it's like, oh, can't do that, can't lose weight. And it's like, well, no, don't just write off the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
Turn it up when they start talking about the eating plans and how much this they should have a
Mm-hmm.
day, and what types of foods need to be eaten to allow your body to start coming down from whatever level it's at.
Yeah.
um I
Yeah.
think so. I've been on a big learning kick like the last few years, just with all types of financial literacy. The way I see it, the more I learn, the more I can share with others, and then that'll help me just be better. Like honestly, I love learning different stuff about all different types of industries. Even if I'm not going to use it myself, I'll just try to pick up some nuggets. So then later on, if I'm talking to somebody and I see that they may be able to use that information, I'll lay it out to them.
Mhm.
But as far as the discernment piece, I think is because I'm listening to so much information, it makes me want to do stuff, but I have to kind of,
Let me have you hold on
yep,
for one
yeah, no,
second.
no, you're
I'll
good.
be right back.
You're good. Yeah, but I mean, I guess you guys can still hear me.
Sorry about that. I had
No,
people
you're good.
yelling in the background.
Hey, it's cool. It's life.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I mean, but in this kind of, but the point that we're at in this conversation is kind of getting back to, why I wrote the book. Like, meet people where they are. Like, I
right.
make 5 figures, rent is due on Friday. Like, help me out.
Yes.
Um, and it's important to note that, like, using the fitness thing as an analogy, like, you don't start out like running marathons. Like, you start out by, like, okay, you walk to the mailbox and
Mhm.
back, then you walk to the end of the driveway and back, then you
Right.
walk to the end of the block and back, and it's these kind of short-term goals that you like line up, and then before you know it, you're walking a mile, you're walking 2 miles, and you're not
Hmm.
getting winded, and you um so it's kind of this concept of you get like 1% better every
Hmm.
day, and then after a year, like, you 365% better, and you're like, wow, how did I even get here?
Right.
um and it's like that, with everything. So, like, and that definitely contrasts with this consumer mentality. I pay for it, I get the benefit now. Every this immediacy of everything
Hmm.
um is kind of, it's artificial, it's kind of contrived. Like, yeah, you can buy something and you can use it, but you may not see the full benefit of it for 3 months, 6 months, a year.
Hmm.
um and so that patience, that delayed gratification, that development of the skill around that product
Right.
um is not given enough, focus.
No, that, I mean, you're completely right. I think, well, honestly, I think when it comes to, I guess, getting back to the whole rent thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
People's, I'd say, main focus more or less is the monetary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what they can do to pay the least the quickest, right? So probably the most interesting note thing that I saw while flipping through, the notes for your book is this thing about free rent,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Sounds great to me. I'd love to have free rent. I'm sure everybody listening would love to have free rent. So please tell us, how do we get free rent?
Yeah, it's funny. People think, oh, free rent, that's not possible. That can't happen. Like,
Hmm.
you up here telling stories. Um, but no, free rent is absolutely real, and it does exist. And there's really two ways that you can get it. So, getting back to the landlord's motivation and mindset, you have to understand that the landlord is in competition for the renter. Like, the landlord needs someone to come and rent their space in order to make that whole investment work. So they are in competition with other landlords for qualified renters. So let's say you have an older apartment building, doesn't have as many amenities, but then there's this new building that gets built and it has all these bells and whistles and all of that.
Hmm.
The new building gets all the foot traffic, the old building doesn't get any. And if you don't get foot traffic, nobody sees your apartments, and if nobody sees them, nobody's going to rent them.
Right.
So how does the old building stand out? The old building could offer 2 weeks of free rent if for those who sign a lease before a certain date. Nothing attracts attention and eyeballs like the ability to get something of quality for free.
Right.
So people will come in and look, and they're really saying, okay, that 2 weeks of rent, that's just marketing. We'll put in the marketing budget, and we'll spend it that way. Because the alternative is you wait a month. If no one rents it, you lose all of the rent for that apartment for the whole month, and you can't get it back. I mean, it's not like a car where if you don't sell it today, you sell it tomorrow. Like, nobody's going to rent use of an apartment from last year.
Right.
That's not even a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this time pressure that landlords are under, and that has in the past pushed property managers to offer free rent. Was one community that I saw in Mountain View, California. And this was a new building. They were offering 6 weeks of free rent if someone would move in and sign a lease. Now, the flip side of that is they were asking, in that particular instance, they were asking sky high rates.
Sure.
So it does balance out. But the point is, they were offering free rent as a concession for people to come and look at the property.
Makes sense.
But the more important way to get free rent, which I think nobody is actually considering, is if you work for the landlord. And nobody's considering it because the landlord is the enemy. We don't work for our enemies.
Sure.
But what working for the landlord means is that you're the first point of contact for your neighbors if they have some kind of problem in their apartment. You may be responsible for cleaning up maintaining the curb appeal and picking up some trash around the property, or cleaning the pool, or letting vendors in when they come to do work on the property. And really what you're doing in that role is you're taking pressure off of the landlord who doesn't live there.
Right.
So the landlord doesn't have to come and visit the property to let that vendor in. You're there to let that vendor in. The landlord doesn't have to deal with, oh, well, my stove wasn't working in my apartment. Well, is your breaker on? That's something easy that somebody on site can look at and say, oh, well, that's the problem. And the landlord doesn't have to be concerned with that. Or more importantly, the landlord doesn't have to send an electrician out there to find out that's the problem. The electrician is there for 5 minutes, flips the breaker, and gets paid $150 for showing up. So these are all the issues that the landlords are dealing with. And if you can help offset some of that by living on site and working for them, then creating that value is what leads to you getting free or reduced rent. And it's a really good strategy for people who have young kids. They want one spouse to stay home, but staying home means they're giving up this income.
Sure.
Well, if we're working on site for the landlord and our rent is, say, $2,000 a month, that's 24 grand a year. That's a pretty good side gig.
Yeah.
But it actually gets better. The non-payment of rent is an after-tax benefit. It's not like you got a job for 24 grand and you're paying taxes on that. There are no taxes on this. So that 24 grand really is kind of like 30, 35 grand.
Sure.
When you look at it, which is an actual job.
Right.
What people would earn from an actual job. So now that stay-at-home parent is contributing financially in a very viable and tangible way, even though they're not working outside the home, and they get the benefit of taking care of the young child at the same time.
Okay.
So this free rent thing is really something that people should be considering and thinking and planning about as they are, thinking about how they want to set up their life and how these different, kind of, product substitutions. Instead of
Hmm.
going out and get a job, substitute this opportunity of working on the site where you live.
Right.
And it really can have a beneficial effect on their financial situation.
Sure. No, that sounds really good. I think both of those are two really good methods. And honestly, the with the first one, after you brung it up, it unlocked a memory I had when I was living in Florida and I was renting a place. I remember that they did, I think they offered the first like month and a half free
Mm-hmm.
for renting the apartment that I was getting. I assume maybe just because in that area, again, I'm in the military, so it's like right outside of the base. There's a whole bunch of, apartment complexes. So, all of us, we have to rent somewhere. We probably prefer closer to the base than farther away. So,
Mm-hmm.
we're all just grabbing them. So they're like, all right, how can we stand out, from these other places? Like, hey, well, if you move here, first month and a half, waive. You don't even got to worry about it. Yeah, actually, it was waived because I was military. I remember
Mm-hmm.
they'll normally have like a little piece of paper. And it's like, this is for military people. You get
Mm-hmm.
this rate's lowered. If you have to, PCS, you can break the lease early, so on and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
this, and that, and you get a month and a half free. So I was like, I'm numbers guy. So I was like, well, heck, month and a half. I was like, well, that's this much. If I just, break that up
Mm-hmm.
over 12 and I minus that from this, technically that's like me paying only this much a month, every month. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, that sounds great. So I went ahead and signed the lease and did that. So that does make
Yeah.
sense. I
Yeah.
think, and I think it could be, even if presenting it to a personal, landlord, um, I don't think it's outlandish to ask for, that kind of concession, especially if like in your second method, if you show that you present some sort of value, to them, whether it be, keeping people on their P's and Q's, I don't know, collecting rent for them, maybe, uh, we talked about moving out. Maybe you're like, hey, I will advertise it for you. Like, you don't
Mm-hmm.
gotta do this. You don't gotta pay this guy. You don't gotta, do this and this. I will find you a person to move into this home. Check. If you want me to find someone to move into these couple of homes, I will do that for you. So now you can give me, my discount or something like
Yeah.
that, just as a trade-off. I think
Yeah.
I like things like that require people to think more so than just doing whatever we know the standard to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Hmm.
that role can be whatever you and the landlord agree on. It could be a full property management role, collecting rent and
Hmm.
dealing with all the tenants and all of that. I mean, it doesn't have to be that. It could
Sure.
be on the other end of the spectrum, it could be just keep an eye on the place, pick up trash, and you'll get a smaller discount for that. Like,
Hmm.
it can be whatever the two of you negotiate.
Right.
And that way it's flexible. But it just doesn't cross people's minds that that is even an option.
No, I like that. I think that might be a great way to go about my fiance's upcoming negotiations. So I'll probably talk with her, just kind of brainstorm like what value do you think you could bring to, your landlord, and we can just kind of try to leverage that to, whether it be keeping the rent the same, maybe making the rent a little bit lower, but it's like we'll do
Mm-hmm.
X, Y, and Z. I'm sure you get a lot of calls about this and that. Would you like to not get any of those calls anymore? Just do
Mm-hmm.
and this, and we'll do this for the next
Yeah.
however many months while we're here.
Yeah. And kind of for the people in the audience who are like, well, I'm not handy. Like, I don't know which end of a screwdriver is what.
Hmm.
Um, in the in the book, there's a story about a guy who actually does this. And he was in this role for 6, 7 years, something like that. He knew nothing when he
Hmm.
initially started. He just went out and bought a toolbox and put some tools in it and had the
Sure.
conversation, and off he went. Um, and even from my own personal experience, when I started down this path of investing in real estate, I didn't know how to fix anything. I didn't know how to install cabinets or tile or
Right.
put up sheetrock or any of that. Like, I went down to Home Depot. There's this orange book that Home Depot was selling. It's called 123 Home Improvement. And that was the start of my education in how to do those things.
Mhm.
Because they don't cover that in MBA school.
Right. Okay. No, no, that all sounds good. So with having respect for your time, Mr. Pogue, we'll try to wrap this up. So I guess to close it out, uh, do you have anything like substantial that you would like to tell the viewers? And then also don't forget to please let them know where they can find you, where they can find your book, all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the biggest thing is that landlords have problems. It's not just they're this group of people that are off in the Caribbean on a yacht somewhere sipping Mai
Hmm.
Tais with umbrellas in them. Like, they have real problems and situations that they need to deal with, and they're constant. Um, so knowing that you as the renter have power and leverage in that conversation to affect the decisions that landlords are making that affect your leasing, your housing situation. So you are not powerless in this discussion.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that is the number one takeaway that I want people to leave this conversation with.
For sure.
Um, and absolutely. So yeah, so people can find me online at rentalsecrets.net. The book is available on Amazon.com and all the usual suspects there. Um, I also have a podcast called Renter Confidential, which is on YouTube. And Renter Confidential just kind of just brings the book to life. And we talk about like current articles, and I interview people who are going through the process or have gone through the process of renting an apartment and kind of what their experience has been.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so those are the places that they can find me online. I'm also actually on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and I post a tip in each of those places every day about how we can make this rental conversation a lot easier and less stressful, and kind of diffuse all of that animosity and tension that's in that conversation, because at the end of the day, renters and landlords are two sides of the same coin.
Like it. Okay, cool. No, can't say it no more better than that. So we will go ahead and wrap it up. Please go out and get Rental Secrets, and follow Justin on all of his social medias, all of his Instagrams, all of his podcasts. Uh, Seems like a pretty intelligent guy to me, and looks like he's out here to help a lot of the people who feel like they've never been helped before. So again, my name is Darius Lester, your financial philosopher, and this is Mammoth Money Mindset.